So we absolutely love it when people send us requests because there are things about forensics that everybody pretty much has to struggle with, and we take what we've learned and we put it out there as a way of giving back. But when we know what it is that you in particular have run up against, what your roadblocks are, then that gives us a lot of very helpful direction. So you can send us an email at speakinbeacons@gmail.com. There's no G in that, by the way, speakinbeacons@gmail.com. Or you could put a comment on one of the YouTube videos. You could tweet us at speakinbeacons on Twitter. There are a lot of ways you can get in touch with us, but we would absolutely love to hear from you if you have anything that you've run up against in any phase of forensics, debate, interp, limited prep, platform, tournament logistics, how to deal with stressful situations, anything like that. What I want to talk about today is something that we've got wind of a couple of conversations about, and that is, what do you do in cross-examination to convey warmth and likability without falling into the trap of kind of repeating a cliche that a lot of people have worn out? And that is starting cross-examination with, "Hi, how are you doing today?" And that, I have to say, my impression, my very powerful impression, as a matter of fact, is that's well-intentioned but self-defeating. Now, it's well-intentioned because, first of all, it's worthwhile by itself to establish right at the beginning an attitude of warmth, and we're all in debate because we enjoy it, and the fact that we are competing against you, it's still an opportunity to be friendly, make friendships, so it's worthwhile by itself even if it doesn't have any effect on the judge. Further, though, as I talked about in one of my past videos, likability and warmth, they underscore your credibility, and they can make your effectiveness as an arguer, as a persuader, they can give you kind of a force multiplier in that area. But the problem is, so, "Hi, how are you doing today?" Especially when judges see it every round, it not only does it stop having that effect, it actually backfires. Because what is essential to conveying that impression of warmth is sincerity. And when it seems as though it is insincere, that you do it because it's something that your coach told you to do, you do it because it's something everybody does and it's become habitual, it actually undercuts your credibility to that measure. Because it looks as though you are going through the motions, which turns sincerity on its head. I really, really don't recommend that you do that. Quite apart from what I know about what's been demonstrated with some data-driven research into how credibility works, I can also add that it's just my own impression from judging rounds where in cross-examination, I know what that first question is going to be. So I think that's actually a couple of seconds wasted in your cross-examination time. Now, it's still worthwhile to use cross-examination to show a little interpersonal warmth. And if you're good, you can do it with your nonverbals, in the middle of asking questions about which you're being businesslike. You can do it with something as simple as your tone of voice. You can do it with a smile. You can do it just by pointing out something about their answer that you think is good, and then following on with an even tougher probe. So it doesn't have to be, okay, check off the first item on my checklist in cross-examination, ask them how they're doing so I can show some interpersonal warmth. You can put it in among your other objectives and be doing it throughout the cross-examination, and that's really what I would recommend. But there are a few other ways to do it. You could start off the cross-examination with something other than, "Hi, how are you doing today?" And we put together a couple of suggestions. The first suggestion is, if there's anything that has been going on at the tournament, use it as a moment to express gratitude. So ask the question of your opponent in cross-examination, "How cool is it that we're to the last round of the day and we're running ahead? Don't we have an awesome tab room?" And that's an easy one for them to agree with. It's not a competitive moment. It's one where everybody in the room, because I imagine the judge would also probably feel good about the fact that the tournament's running on time. Everybody can agree and everybody can feel united for a moment. And it is kind of a win-win-win situation because your opponent will also get an opportunity to show a little interpersonal warmth, but there's nothing wrong with that. It could be also that something really neat happened in the middle of the tournament, that, maybe it rained for a while and the rain stopped and there was a rainbow visible, or we have a lot of ducks around here, so occasionally, that's why the Oregon mascot is the duck. Occasionally, you'll get some of the mallards, some of the cute little ducks, and they'll do something cute in the courtyard. And so, if a bunch of competitors are out there and see that, then maybe you mention that. Did you see the ducks out in the courtyard? Weren't they adorable? Something like that, that everybody at the tournament is likely to be privy to. You can mention that and have your moment of interpersonal warmth that way. And what it isn't is it's not a cliche. It's not something recycled. It's something genuine. A second thing you can do, if you know that your opponent is from out of town, then you can have a moment of being a good host. And you can say, so is your trip in good? So have you seen any of the good local sites here? Now obviously you want to keep this quick because you want to get right down to business. You don't want to convey to the judge that you are padding out your cross-examination or being wasteful in your cross-examination. You want to spend the overwhelming majority, all but a few seconds of those 3 minutes of cross-examination doing things that are substantively, argumentatively useful for your side. But a little bit of an investment of time doesn't hurt. A third way that you can approach it, and this is a dangerous way, but it's also a way that if you don't mind living a little bit dangerously, can be a little bit fun, is you can start off cross-examination with a joke. And with a joke that you can form into a question. And so riddles can actually be pretty good for this. And this, we indulged ourselves a little bit. You have to hunt a little bit to find riddles because it completely spoils it if you tell the same riddle multiple times or if people hear you use the same riddle multiple times. So if you use them more than once for a judge, even by accident, or if you use them for an observer, an audience member who then might mention to the judge, yeah, they recycled that riddle. But we went digging around and we found a few examples because you want to make sure they're about third grade level, that they are cute more than anything else, that they don't require a ton of thought, and that there is no danger at all that they are in any way controversial or, you know, just any kind of thing that's going to stir up trouble. You want to make sure, especially, that they don't make your opponent seem foolish, which is why jokes that are little, you know, little how do you, what do you type riddles with a question and an answer, just a little moment of silliness, and then you plow straight into talking about the issues going on in the debate, that could be a good setup for displaying your warmth and likability. So here are some examples. We started off with some that would work for the STOA team policy topic. What did Cinderella wear when she went swimming in the ocean? Glass flippers. What happens when you cross a great white shark with a cowfish? I'm not sure, but I think I'll let you milk it. You know what a shark's favorite hobby is? Oh, anything he can sink his teeth into. What do you get when you cross a school of fish with a herd of elephants? Swimming trunks. What lies on the bottom of the ocean and shivers? A nervous wreck. What does an octopus wear on a cold day? A coat of arms. And let's see, just two more for the STOA topic. What did one wave say to the other wave? Nothing. It just waved. And then what did one tide pool say to the other tide pool? Show me your muscles. And they're dorky. And the way you want to do it, you don't want to do it deadpan. You want to do it when you have the punchline of the joke with just a little bit of playfulness in your voice, and then say, all right, now let me ask you about the plan. All right, now let me ask you about where your funding's coming from. Just a quick little moment there, and it's something people haven't seen before, and especially if you don't repeat the joke, then the problem you had of it being manufactured, it is a little manufactured. You obviously planned in advance, but it being a cliche and it being kind of empty, that problem it takes care of. And if the joke can even achieve the status of being cute, if it can even get a smile out of the participants in the audience, it can serve your purpose. So here are a few jokes that would work for the NCFCA team policy topic. Well, okay, this one's probably got a little bit of kind of latent hostility to it, but what are you going to do with elections? Chiefly all we were able to find were jokes about politics. So here are a few examples, and you would want to proceed with a little bit of caution. Although I think for most of these, they're generic enough that it would be pretty safe. What do you call a group of skydiving politicians? Skeet. Did you hear the one about the guy who mugged a congressman? And he said, give me all your money. And the congressman said, you can't do this to me, I'm a congressman. And the guy said, good point, give me all my money. This one's old, very familiar. You've probably heard it a couple of dozen times by now, but how are politicians like diapers? They need to be changed from time to time and for the same reason. And then one of the things you could take, you can take one-line jokes that aren't set up as questions, and you can frame them with, did you hear about? And here are two examples of that. Did you hear about Henry Adams' definition of an election? An election is when the air is full of speeches and vice versa. Now that joke may require enough thinking, it may confuse people, especially if they don't see the joke written down and you go through it too quickly, that it might not be that good of a fit for this kind of circumstance. But it was the only one we could find that was explicitly about an election. Here's another one. Did you ever hear about Ben Franklin's definition of democracy? Democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. And then one thing you might do is you might just take recent events, recent current events, and if there's something kind of big that everybody has had to deal with, then you might use that as your jumping off point. So, I'm going to go ahead and give you this example because we have it on the list here. But back in the early part of the season, there was some pretty severe winter, and people had some travel difficulties. And so one of the riddles that you might open up your cross-examination with is, what lives in the winter, dies in the summer, and grows with its root on top? An icicle. Now the reason we added that one to the list, but I don't think that's that good a fit because it doesn't have the cuteness factor. It has a little bit more of you ask a riddle to play a game, and then it just seems kind of bizarre. So I guess it's a good illustration to include, not because I would recommend you use riddles like that, but because it's an example of the kind you might want to steer clear of. If what you're going for is a moment of interpersonal warmth, then you want to make sure that there's some very lighthearted, very gentle, very straightforward, uncomplicated humor in there. So that's a way of doing it. I have to say, just to reiterate, that I still think going about your business in cross-examination using your nonverbals to bring out some interpersonal warmth is probably a better approach. And I think the gratitude for things going well at the tournament, mentioning things that have happened at the tournament, use those for that moment of connection, that moment of humanizing you and making you seem a little bit less like an argument generation machine. I still think that's a better approach. But the riddle approach can work. And one of the last things I'll say is, if you start off the cross-examination, then you're using the primacy effect. And so the judge's first impression of you is that you are a likable and very human and very relatable person. But you might also work the recency effect. One of the ways you might break out of the pattern and at least show them something they haven't seen before. In certain rounds, sometimes going into cross-examination that you don't have as many questions as usual, and so if it seems pretty safe that even doing cross-examination right, where you have things to ask about, and then you ask follow-ups as they generate themselves, as opposed to thinking, I am going to ask 3 minutes of completely distinct questions, changing the subject each time. But sometimes you even know following the follow-ups and trying to whittle down their answer into something useful, even then you'll probably have a little time left over. And if you've got to the end of things that you can really productively ask about, see if you can't take whatever approach you're using to humanizing yourself and put it at the end. And leave it as the lingering impression the judge has of you, especially if it's been kind of a vigorous cross-examination where you appropriately, assertively, and professionally pin them down on some of the concessions that you need. See if you can get to the end of that and have right then a moment of friendliness and connection. I think that, if anything, could actually make an even more powerful impression and underscore your credibility. So those are some things to take into account in trying to accomplish that objective in cross-examination. Give them a try, experiment a little bit, and see if you can find the approach that works for you.